Son of David, have pity on me. On this day, we think of our brethren in the East. You know the story of Kiev, the important baptism in the 900s. And according to the story, they wanted to know which form of Christianity to embrace. So they sent legates here and there, and two came back from Constantinople with this report: we did not know whether we were in heaven or on earth. And so the emperor decided that is the form of Christianity that we will embrace. So the whole of that Slavonic bloc took it on, and right now still uses it well, 3 hours at a time, with time apart from profanity, time to enter into mode, not looking at their watches. These are our brethren, and we suffer with them. Well, to them, this prayer became, in a more Christianized form, the prayer of the heart, the Jesus prayer. And from Son of David, we have Son of God. We have the two poles, me a sinner at one end, and the divinity at the other. And the link between the two is mercy, a liaison, which, by the way, we're still singing. The first reading we often hear at marriages, and quite often the celebrant will preach on the quality to be expected of marital love. That concerns you, a lot of you, but the essence concerns us all. Do you know that a monk knows a lot about married life? Why? He's living it. Many things are the same, but slightly different in mode between the monastic life and the married life. The domestic church is either inside the cloister or inside the four walls of the family, but love has to be lived. Do you think it's easy making a vow of stability in one place and being in the same aquarium until death? It's not. But divine grace is in the midst. Over the years, I've noticed how from one culture to another, issues are handled. I remember one time being quite impressed by one chapter meeting, not in this country, where there was a slight difference of opinion. And in the solemn ambit of the chapter, one of the brethren got up, gave a big clout to the one next to him, and sat down as though nothing had happened. In Ireland, things are slightly more peaceful. If I only knew then what I know now, I would have settled down better in early life. I'll just give you a concrete example, but it might concern you in your own way. Distinguishing between the essence and the accidents. When one is young, the accidents are important. Details are important. Observances are important. One is idealistic. It has to be so or else. One has seen something and one wants to stick to it. Well, it got me into trouble. I was transferred in the mid-80s from France to Ireland to Roscrea, partly because they were more intellectual there and they saw I needed more intellectual work. But I was an idiot. I'll tell you exactly why, just that you don't make the same mess. It might apply to young people, by the way, who have an ideal. But the French pole of things, there was the perpetual silence, and we mean business, serious business. That was great. The thing was that I mistook that for the essence. When I came back to Ireland, and there I was in Roscrea, and this was very different. The Irish way was very Irish. A rule is sort of a rule. So I took this on board for a while, and I couldn't get used to having to speak. So of course I was making an issue of it. But the idiot in the midst didn't see from the tip of his nose. What I didn't see was what I see now with clarity. Years down the line, I was in the hermitage, and the phone went. Who was at the other end but my former abbot? Dear, dear Father Abbot, Columkill O'Toole, Abbot of Roscrea, kindness itself. I broke into tears. There are other things in the monastic life apart from usages, and one happens to coincide with the first reading today. Love. Love. Something similar actually I found here back in Meath. How many bishops in the whole Catholic world will you find who will come as regular as clockwork from the west end of the diocese to the east to talk quietly to a hermit that he professed, to see how he was getting on and to talk it through? Not many. The same goodness and kindness. Father Michael too owes something to that goodness and kindness. We're both, as he put it once, creatures of Bishop Smith. A good bishop, a good abbot, is Christ, and his voice is Vox Christi. Blessed is the diocese or the abbey that has a true icon of Christ. I want to go into one issue today. It's the issue of anger, which Paul talks about, because it has to be handled in charity. Anger management. How do we react? Bubble, sieve, boiling point. We have ignition. We have lift-off. We have breakup. Well, we don't have to explode. Each one has his own mechanism of ingesting anger. But 10 years ago, I happened to have contact with a bishop in another country to get permission to do something in his diocese. He happened to be a Welsh-speaking bishop, and I won't go into any detail. So I wrote in Welsh, in perfect Welsh, and a letter came back immediately in perfect English, complaining that my Welsh was too complicated. Of course, I didn't reply in any direct means, but I was seething. So what did I do? I wrote to a good Baptist minister, friend of mine, who lives in Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll, Goger y Chwyrndrobull, Llantysilio Gogogoch, emphasizing the fact that I was writing to somebody who lived in Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll, Goger y Chwyrndrobull, Llantysilio Gogogoch. Because every time I wrote Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll, Goger y Chwyrndrobull, Llantysilio Gogogoch, so much energy was used that I had nothing spare to do anything more damaging or dangerous. It calmed down. Remember the hint. Don't hit directly. Let it pass as something or someone gets broken. I conclude, my friends, we're all in this together. We know not what the morrow will hold. But I want to draw your attention to something which could be perhaps more relevant than we think. Do you know what happened on the 25th of March, 1986? Well, it's this. I remember it because the abbot did the act of consecration in union with all the abbots and bishops of the world at the same time as St. John Paul II did it in the Vatican before the statue of Fatima, which he brought there for him, which contained by then the bullet that was meant for him. Well, he consecrated the whole world, And now what? He wanted to say the word Russia. He wanted, and he was asking the people controlling it right to the last minute, the last moment. Can I say it? Can I say it? Can I say it? No! It was height, remember, of the Cold War, and they didn't want to rock the boat. He was not allowed to use the word Russia in the consecration to the Immaculate Heart. He did say it under his breath. However, it had its effect, because through intelligence we know it was picked up on satellite that something happened 6 weeks later. On notice, the 13th of May. It was that a huge convoy of very dangerous nuclear arms heading for an obvious spot where they were going to break the umbrella of protection from the States towards Europe, and they were going to do something, and it was the right moment to do it. Because under the Carter regime, America was unprepared, de-escalation, and Europe wasn't prepared either. But she intervened. And the whole thing, without any explanation, went technically completely wrong. Kaput! The whole thing just went wrong. All the equipment just was completely rendered useless. And it was an intervention of Blessed Lady which averted what would have been probably a very dangerous war. I make a jump. I fast forward to this very day. Do you know that according to what was leaked out, I cannot prove it, you'd have to ask the person who was there, but it seems that when Vladimir Putin, some years ago, going back a few years now, came for a private audience with the Holy Father, the present Holy Father, Vladimir Putin was aware of the story of Fatima, and according to the informal leakage which came out through something that the translator, the interpreter at the event whispered privately, that the question of Fatima had come up, that Putin himself had actually broached the issue, hinting that it might be a good idea to do that consecration, because he, after all, was of faith. And apparently, according to the interpreter, the Holy Father answered, "It's not on my program." Be that as it may, it might be a good idea right now if it were. And I think that it's worth dropping a clangor of a hint that maybe this would be a good idea to bring back Russia to peace and quiet, lest the whole thing blow up terribly in our face. I think you know the consequences of serious intervention from many countries together at this time. Well, it could, if a certain pressure from many, many people across the Catholic world were put on the Holy Father to do exactly what happened in 1985, on the same day, 25th of March, which is not far away, or perhaps the 13th of May, a reconsecration, if you want a neutral term, but with explicitly the word Russia in it, to the Immaculate Heart, remembering the words of our Blessed Lady at Fatima. Eventually, it will be made, but it will be late. And you remember, Russia would be converted, and there would be a period of peace for the world. I leave it with you, my friends, just to be aware that I believe that the experts who have looked into it understand that the notion of conversion here is actually quite profound, and it would mean precisely the healing. It would mean that with their own rights, which has never been questioned, they would recognize again the Patriarch of the West the Vicar of Christ on earth, which was always recognized in the early church. Proof? Read Pope St. Leo the Great, already in the 400s, indicating quite clearly that East and West knew what he was. When it came to the Council of Chalcedon in 451, which eventually sorted out the whole Christological issue, it was his voice that carried the day. He sent legates, and the famous Leonine letters were read, a perfect treatise on Christology. They all, after all the debate, sat still and said, Peter has spoken. One last thing. Do you know that in, I forget the year, it was around 1932, that all the bishops of Portugal, with their cardinal, explicitly consecrated Portugal to the Immaculate Heart. And do you know what happened? El Milagro, the miracle. There was a huge outpouring of grace over the whole country. Thousands upon thousands of vocations of both sexes. They were spared involvement with the Spanish Civil War, which they were going for inevitably. We can see it historically. It's inexplicable. And they were spared the worst of the Second World War. It was a direct consequence of that explicit consecration to the Immaculate Heart. And we believe, experts believe, that Our Lady wanted it to be seen as a foretaste of what heaven intended. That heaven had proposed to mankind in 1917 a way out of what it was heading for. But it had to be seen that it was due to one thing, explicitly, the intervention of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. What have we to lose, my friends? PC? Think on these things. And let's take our Blessed Lady at her word.